Today, I want to talk about loudness. Well, I don't know if I want to talk about this. I've had people asking me about my thoughts on this for a while, and so I'm going to throw them out there today. Let me preface everything by saying this is going to be totally my opinion. Well, in a lot of ways. We'll get to some examples a little later on to demonstrate some things, hopefully. But a lot of this is just largely my opinion, so take it with an extreme grain of salt. Before we jump in, first of all, thanks for coming by. Thanks for checking out this video. If you're new to the channel, there's a bunch of affiliate links down below. Using those links, checking out the templates I have available, just help support me, help support this channel, and lets me keep making videos. So I just appreciate it if you use those, but no pressure. There should also be chapter markers down below. So if you want to jump around the videos, feel free. But let's get into this. So there's two things I want to talk about with loudness. Number one is going to be largely my opinion. And, feel free to say otherwise or give your thoughts on loudness down below in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I know I'm probably crazy on some of this, but if you want to affirm that, knock yourself out. Or if you want to tell me I'm not crazy, hey, you can do that too. But this is very much my opinion. So the thing with loudness as it stands right now in 2025, a lot of the things I think that we do for loudness, it's fear-based. I mean, a lot of it has come from fear just over the years. This fear that I have to do something to be competitive, which is kind of silly in and of itself. I mean, we're making music. Music is art. Art is not competition. I've never met a fan of music who was like, oh my gosh, I just couldn't listen to one more song. I could not listen to one more new artist. It's just kind of a ridiculous concept. Most of the people I know who love music, they can't get enough. They're always looking for new stuff. I'm old. I'm still looking for new music all the time. And I think that is very much across many generations. Like, people who love music, they just want to find new music. So this idea of being competitive is kind of ridiculous, because what do you mean competitive? Who are you competing against? That's kind of a industry label sort of thing, like you're going to lose a sale or something. But these days, especially with streaming services, it's kind of ridiculous. If you've got a good song and people like it, they're going to listen to it. If they like you as an artist, they're going to listen to you. But a lot of what people are doing with loudness these days, and this goes back, at least 30 years, really longer, the kind of quote unquote loudness wars, a lot of that just came from fear. And for us as mix engineers, a lot of what we do these days, it's still kind of based in that. I mean, I get it. If I'm doing a mix shootout, I am definitely going to be concerned that my mix is going to be quieter than another engineer's mixer, and the A&R guy or the artist or whoever is going to be listening to this and judging it, they're not going to have the sense to sort of turn the volume knob up and listen at the same level. That, I think, is a legit kind of fear or concern or something that you would worry about. And you have to kind of play that game to a certain extent. But the source of that ultimately is fear. And I get it. You want your mix to be the one that gets picked, and you do whatever it takes to make sure you win. I guess that is kind of a competition in a way. If you're in a shootout for a gig or for work, I mean, that's a legitimate sort of concern. But it's still based on fear. And in my experience, making decisions about audio based on fear, it's not really the best way to make decisions. I mean, yeah, we do it, but let's step back a bit and start thinking about this a little bit more. So, to me, when it comes to loudness, and I'm probably the only person I've ever heard who will say this, I don't believe it's a thing. There's no such thing as loudness with records. Loudness, or how loud our mix is going to be listened to, that's controlled by the listener. If you want to be in charge of how loud something is, go do live sound. Go mix feature films, because that's really the only place where you, well, at least off the top of my head, those are like the only places you can control how loud something actually will be. I spent a lot of years doing live sound, and I've had people ask me to turn things up, and I've had people ask me to turn things down because I controlled how loud it is. With the music that we're doing in the studio and for records and videos and things that are going out into the world that way, the listeners have control of how loud it is. I mean, these days you go online and it's like, if I pull up a YouTube video, there's a volume control inside the video, and then there's a volume control on the actual like playback device, whether it's a computer, a phone, whatever, somebody's headphones, some of those have their own volume controls. There's so many different ways that people can adjust how loud our music is. It's kind of nuts to me. Now, what we do have control of is sort of relative loudness, sort of, where we can control sort of the perceivable loudness of the music we're making relative to something else that's been released. The kind of average loudness, that is something we do kind of have control over. But really, as engineers, all we actually control is the signal level. And with that, we've got our sort of average level of things, and then you've got the peaks. And, we can control that average relative to other stuff, but it's still, to me, not really loudness. The listener controls how loud it's going to be. And on top of that, with the sort of average loudness thing that we do control, in a lot of ways, we are losing control of that, because every streaming service out there right now, they all do some kind of loudness normalization where they are adjusting the perceived loudness of every track so that it stays fairly consistent for listeners. I know you can turn that off, but the average person, they're not turning that off. Maybe snobs like us, we might go in and turn it off because we want to hear exactly what it's doing. But the average listener, they're not turning that stuff off, and it's turned on by default. So again, in some ways, worrying about this kind of stuff, it's kind of silly, and it's getting more silly. I think there are corners of the industry where, yeah, it makes more sense to be a little concerned about this, but in a lot of ways, maybe not. Now, given all that, do I think you should not make like loud records? No, actually, I think there is a reason why you may want to really kind of raise the average level and reduce the peaks, decrease the dynamics of things, but not because of fear and not because the industry wants you to. There are aesthetic reasons to it. And what I really want to get into is what happens when we do start reducing the dynamic range to raise the average level of our mixes and lowering the peaks. There is an aesthetic thing that happens to a recording when we do that. And that's a thing that you may or may not want, especially if you're going to be putting a song in a playlist with other songs that have had that dynamic range reduced. There may be reasons why you would not want to reduce it in that case, and there may be reasons why you do want to reduce it. So I want to just sort of show you some of the effects of basically reducing the dynamic range on things. One thing I should note here is I'm not talking about Atmos at all today. None of this really apply. Well, I guess it sort of does apply to Atmos because we're talking about aesthetics. In general, I feel like with Atmos, more dynamics generally wins in Atmos. There's something that happens with things being more dynamic, and from an aesthetic standpoint, from the way the music feels, it usually feels better to have things a little more dynamic. But with just a stereo release, I feel a little different. Sometimes I want things a little more crushed, squashed, spanked, limited, however you want to describe it. So let's look at some of the effects of things when we start doing a lot of dynamic range reduction. So what I have here is a mix I did a little earlier this year. I think it was either earlier this year or late last year. And what I did was I printed it out before the final limiter went on it. So I've got, that mix several times here. And then what I've done is I've taken FabFilter Pro L2, which is usually my limiter of choice these days. I've got that on all of these different versions, and I'm doing a different amount of limiting on it basically to get a particular, loudness, I guess. I'm going to call it loudness, even though I said loudness isn't a thing. For just reducing confusion that I've already caused, sorry, I'm going to just call it loudness because I'm using a loudness meter to measure this stuff, and hopefully it'll make sense. We're going to judge relative loudness on all of these different versions. One of the things I've done with this limiter, though, is I have this 1-to-1 button in. And, oh, by the way, with this view, I prefer this view. I don't like the history one. If you don't want to see that, this is just the compact. Like, if I go to medium or large, then you get back to the kind of big window on the Pro L2. I just like having it in compact because I don't really care about all of that other stuff. When I originally delivered this, I delivered it right here, this master neg 8.5. So what that means is the loudness of this kind of chorus section, as you'll see. In fact, here, I'll just play a little bit of it so you can get a sense for this. Looking at the short-term loudness, which is what I typically look at if I'm looking at this at all, on this particular version that I delivered, it was in the kind of neg 8 to neg 9 range. And what I've done then is I've adjusted the gain on this to get some different levels, and I want to play it so that you can hear what actually happens sonically when we start doing a lot of dynamic range reduction and really raising that average level, because there are some things that maybe we like, but there are also some things that are going to be compromises and that we're going to trade in pursuit of doing this. And in my opinion, it's always better to make decisions on things based on how they sound, because that's going to correspond a lot more to how we feel when we listen to something, and it's going to correspond more to how the song actually connects with a listener. And if you are trying to reach new fans and make new fans and connect with your music, to me, that is something that you really should be thinking about, maybe a little more than, someone else's song in a way. But maybe we'll talk about that a little more a little later. I've got this mix up here, basically this is without limiting, and then I've got one that goes down here at about, loudness of like 6.5. So I'm going to go between these two extremes so you can really hear what's going on. So here we go with, and I'll just loop the same section. So this is going to get old really fast, but sorry, just focus on the sonics. So we'll start with the kind of unlimited, and then I'm going to go to the extreme. So, depending on how experienced you are with this kind of stuff, you might be hearing different things or not hearing certain things. So, what I want you to listen to, I'm going to play it again, not as long of a bit. Just listen to the low end. Listen to the bass. And I'm going to start with the more compressed version this time, the more limited version, and then I'm going to go and open it up. So this is one of the side effects of doing a lot of heavy gain reduction. And it's not even really a question of gain reduction. This is a side effect of when we try and push our average level up. We lose the bottom end. It comes down. When I go to that unlimited version in here on my speakers, I feel a lot more low end. It just feels a little bit bigger down there. And I like that. The reason this is kind of happening is because of kind of the way our ears work. For us to perceive low frequencies the same way we perceive the mids and highs, we generally need more energy or more signal level in those low frequencies. So as we are kind of pushing up against our ceiling, because there is a limit as to how loud we can actually get with digital. That 0 at the top, that is our ceiling. You cannot go above that. I know some people do, and I don't like it, but I know people do it. To me, though, there is a ceiling up there, and we are trading things when we go there. And in order to push up our average level, one of the first things that's going to be affected in the frequency spectrum from that is our low frequencies, because mixes in general, if we put a spectrum analyzer on here, in fact, hey, let's do that. All right, so I have a frequency analyzer here, real-time analyzer. Just want to show you something real quick. If I play this mix back again. So you can just see how it slopes down in frequency content. If we're going to push this level up, basically, of all this, the stuff that's going to get hit first is the stuff with more energy. So it's going to be the low frequencies. So we're going to lose some of that as we push up level. I can just hear it in here. It definitely reduces. And everything else kind of squishes together in a way. Now, that squishing together, that may be something aesthetically pleasing to you, may be pleasing to the artist you're working with. If that's the case, hey, go for it. Do it. I mean, when I'm working on music in here, it's not usually my song. And I will do whatever an artist wants. If they want to do that kind of crush thing on there, I'll do it. Now, I might offer another version and say, hey, listen to some of these things. Are you sure you're down with this? Is this the direction you want to go? And then they can make a decision. But ultimately, it's up to them. It's not really my call. I mean, I like this unlimited version in a way. Now, let's look at all of these different versions. I'm going to start with kind of the unlimited version, and then I'm just going to add more and more limiting to it so that you can kind of hear what happens. Okay, so going through all of these different versions, I delivered at this neg 8.5. I kind of wish I had delivered at the neg 10. I like the neg 10 a little bit better than the unlimited version, I think. I don't mind the unlimited version, but when I get to the neg 10 one, it kind of pulls some things together a little bit, and I kind of prefer it. The big difference, though, between the 10 and the 8.5 to me, at least right now, what is sticking out to me as what I prefer about that neg 10 is the low end definitely feels better to me. It's not a huge difference, and that's one of the things about some of this stuff. I mean, in a lot of ways, this might be subtle to your ears depending on where you're at right now, and that's okay. But I think subtleties matter, and I think they do have an effect on how things are perceived and how things impact a listener. And I kind of prefer that deeper low-end version. And if I was doing this over, that's really what I would have delivered. It is what it is. My client was happy with the neg 8.5, so that's what I gave him. Now, there's another side effect, though, to reducing all this dynamic range when we have to start doing a lot of limiting, clipping, compression, all of that kind of stuff. Saturation, which is basically just another form of clipping, saturation, kind of the same thing. I did another video on that. But anyways, one of the side effects with this is distortion. As we limit more, there is more distortion. And hearing this kind of stuff in context can be difficult at first. But one of the tricks to hearing some of this sometimes is to actually listen in a mid-side mode and to just listen to the sides. So I have this BX Solo plugin up here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to solo the sides and play it back and go through all of these different versions. And I'll start by going with the extremes so that you can kind of hear what's going on with the distortion. listen to, and I know it's kind of hard because we're listening to a very strange context of the music here, but just listen to kind of the cymbals, listen to that sort of hi-hat and what's going on with that going between the sort of unlimited version and the heavily limited version. Just starts to get this kind of grittiness, this sort of crunch to things. And that kind of subtle stuff in the overall mix, that can get fatiguing to listen to over time. And it kind of wears you out. Now, let's listen to this awful stuff. Sorry, this is horrible to listen to this way. But we're in engineer mode and it can be revealing. So I'm going to go through all the versions and see what happens. Again, the kind of neg 10 version to me, it's a little better of a trade-off, I feel like. Just knowing the other things that happen in there that I do like versus, some of the artifacts that are happening. I don't mind the neg 8.5 as much as the 6.5. The neg 6.5, that one I do not like. The neg 8.5, I could live with that. And that's what I delivered. But looking at this now, I really think I should have delivered with a little less limiting on it. But, that's the way this goes sometimes. I guess my point in all of this is there is an aesthetic thing that happens when we are trying to raise the average loudness of something. And that is something I think we should pay attention to. That is something that you may prefer one way or the other. Your artists, your clients, they may prefer it one way or the other. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. It's just personal taste. Personally, I tend to like stuff maybe not totally crushed, but I also want things to sit in a playlist next to other stuff. And sometimes if you don't give this kind of same aesthetic treatment to something and you put it in a playlist with stuff that has been treated that way, it might stand out for all the wrong reasons. And now it doesn't stand out necessarily as being better. It just kind of stands out as not feeling like all of this other music. At the same time, though, sometimes by going a little less on sort of the dynamic reduction, the compression, the limiting, those kinds of things, it can, I think, give you an edge in a playlist because it will help you stand out a little bit more when the loudness normalization and all that kind of stuff happens with the streaming services. Now your song, it may actually sound a little bit bigger, but it's kind of a fine line. And that's something that as engineers, it's something that we have to play with, and you've got to make a decision with your artists and your clients, and everybody's got to get on board and see what works. So anyways, that's just some of my thoughts on loudness. How loud should you make something? I don't know. You have to figure that out with your clients. You got to figure it out for yourself. Which one do you prefer? listen close and make a decision. Does it matter? Yes and no. But I think if you're going to think about this stuff and make decisions on it, it is a better sort of angle to come at from what does it do to the sound of things rather than worrying about a number. I mean, if you want to go chase numbers, why are you in music? That sucks. I mean, that's like the most un-rock and roll, unmusical thing in the world, I think. I mean, I know doing music, it raises kids' math scores, and it does impact that. And there is a lot of math in music, but if you want to just do straight math, I mean, go do straight math. Probably make more money doing it. You want to make music, worry about how it sounds. Don't worry about the loudness exactly. If you want to put a number on things, I think when you get in that neg 10 to neg 8 range, that's where you're going to be up with a lot of releases. A lot of the current label stuff, yeah, they're pushing it a lot harder, but not all of it. And sometimes, maybe if you go to 8, 7 even, you might come out sounding better than some of those big releases. And if you get your music played next to some of that stuff, that might help. Might not, but might help. Anyways, my opinion on loudness, quote unquote loudness, which I said isn't a thing, and then talked about it for a long time. What do you think about loudness? Let me know down below in the comments. Leave a comment. I'll check it out. I may not respond, especially if you're mean. If you're mean and nasty about it, I'm not going to respond. I'm just going to let it sit there, though. But, leave a comment. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.